The Nintendo GameCube controller, one of Nintendo's most iconic controllers ever made. We've seen this very controller used on every single Nintendo console since the GameCube because the Nintendo fans cannot get enough of this controller. For a controller to still be used 21 years later, you know that you are dealing with something truly special. I've asked myself all the time, how can we implement the GameCube controller with the Nintendo Switch's portability? And today, I believe I've found just the thing. Hey, what's going on everyone? Monado Max here, and today I want to talk to you about something very special that I found on the internet. And I have found something that turns your Nintendo Switch into a GameCube controller. Right here it's called the NYXi Wizard Wireless Controller. Not sure why they went with that name. I know that's their company name. Straight up, just gonna be honest, it's such a weird name, but it's unique, I guess. It's unique. I guess that's why they went with it. And it is a wireless GameCube controller that can also be Joy-Cons. Obviously, we've seen Nintendo and third-party companies try to make their own very similar GameCube controller that would be a wireless controller, but we've never seen something quite like this, where you can take this and take the controllers apart. I'm trying to take the controller apart. Where you can take the controller apart and put it on your Nintendo Switch. This is a very unique item, and there's a lot of cool things that I want to talk to you about when it comes to this controller. So first off, let's start off the price point of this controller. I was very impressed to find out that, knowing that this was a third-party controller, it wasn't a fan-made, but it was heavily inspired by the GameCube. I was expecting a controller of this kind, with the amount of detail and features on this controller, that it would have been a pretty pricey controller. I was surprised to tell you that this controller I only had to spend 70 bucks. I got a free code for shipping, so the shipping was free. I know in some places you're gonna have to pay like 15 bucks for shipping, but the controller itself was 70 bucks. That's cheaper than a Nintendo Switch Pro controller. Those range for 75 bucks. So this is right up there in terms of the same price as other premium controllers out there. So I was very impressed about that. And as you can see, it's definitely very much like a GameCube controller. The buttons, layout, everything is very much exactly the same as the GameCube controller. It's even got back pedal buttons. That's a new feature. And then you got very satisfying ZR buttons. And honestly, one of my favorite things is that it lights up. The buttons light up. That is a very cool feature that, in all honesty, you don't need, but it's still cool. I've had the chance to use both this and a GameCube controller for the past 3 weeks now, trying to figure out which I preferred. And does this controller satisfy your GameCube needs? Does it feel like you're actually playing a GameCube controller? Well, in this video, I want to go over all of that, talking to you guys how I feel comparing this with an actual GameCube controller, and how I feel about the portability of this, since you can obviously take this apart and put it into the Switch. Now, I want to get into a minor complaint here, which is actually kind of a big complaint. The battery life on this thing is absolutely garbage. I believe I've gotten about 3 hours out of this. I don't know if it's depending on the type of games that you play, but the battery life does not survive very long when it comes to this controller right here. And I think that's very disappointing. And not to mention, I think with the way that it's charging, I think is pretty annoying. If it had a way to charge it better, I would be able to handle these 3 hours completely fine. But the way to charge it, if you're not connecting it to the Switch, of course, because when you connect it to your Switch, it's going to charge it both things, because it's like a Joy-Con basically. But if you're trying to plug it up like a Pro controller when it's dead and play while charging, you can't really do that here. I mean, you can do it, but it's going to be very uncomfortable. The charging ports are at the bottom here. And as you can see, there is 2 C ports right here. I think it would have been really cool with this grip that they give you if they somehow could have incorporated a charging port. Like, I know that there's a Nintendo Switch charging grip out there where you can put the Joy-Cons in there. It would have been cool if they could have came included with something like that. That way, you know, you could actually plug it up and charge it while playing without having to bring the Switch out of dock mode. That is something that is pretty annoying. Other than that, when I'm playing a game like Smash Bros, because I know that's really who's going to be using these controllers are the Smash Bros players, I was very impressed. I felt like I was using an actual GameCube controller. The only thing that is noticeably different from a controller like this than an actual GameCube controller is the joysticks. I don't know what I could compare this to, because the thing I'm about to compare it to, it's similar to that, but not exactly. But these joysticks right here really reminds me of the Nintendo 3DS joystick with how it feels, and it feels good, but at the same time I kind of would have liked them to use that GameCube controller joystick because it feels right, doesn't feel weird. And the C-stick, that throws me off that the C-stick is the same way. That would probably be the only noticeable difference from this and a GameCube controller. The buttons feel absolutely great though. Feels exactly like a normal GameCube controller. And honestly, there's something about this controller that I like better than the actual GameCube controller itself, and that is this D-pad. This D-pad is honestly the most satisfying D-pad I have ever used in a gaming controller. This is really cool. Just like the back buttons are different than the controller, but they're satisfying. One of the cool features with this being like a Joy-Con, it connects to your Switch, so you can actually turn your Switch on with this controller. One of the very cool features of this controller, I mean, any controller that connects to the Switch, if it like properly connects to the Switch, can do that. I just think it's cool that something like this can do that because it's got your home button, it's got everything that a today GameCube controller would need if it was going to work on the Switch. Now, sometimes it can be confusing using this controller for a regular game just because of the button layout. And that's not this controller's fault. It's just trying to be a GameCube controller where you can use it for today's Nintendo Switch games, where you don't have to limit yourself to playing only games like Mario, Sunshine, and Super Smash Bros. Because with the GameCube adapter, you can only play Smash Bros. Ultimate, and I believe you can now do Mario Sunshine with that. With this, you can play every Nintendo game, every third-party game, with Nintendo Switch controls in the format of a GameCube controller like this, which is very cool. Now, the only complaints I would have with this controller when you're playing it in docked mode is really the joysticks. The joysticks feel a little unnecessary. That does not feel good. I don't like how the joysticks feel. I got used to it over time, but if you're really a big fan of those joysticks from the GameCube controller, I don't think this controller is going to be good for you if you're playing a game like Smash Bros. Competitively. Now, if you're a big fan of the controller, the GameCube controller, and want to play Switch games in a GameCube controller format, I believe a controller like this is the way to go because it works perfect for that. It's just those joysticks make it a little weird. So for a normal, just playing a random game, it's very good. It's a really good controller. Sometimes I will say I got confused with the button layout, and this isn't the controller's fault. It's just trying to play a Nintendo Switch game in the GameCube controller format. I got everything mixed up. Like, for example, I was playing Travis Strikes Again with this, and I got my controls really messed up with that when I was using this. But luckily, I had a Pro controller right beside of me, and I was able to look at that, and I was like, oh, so I need to hit this button. Once I got a Pro controller right in front of me, I knew what buttons I needed to hit. So it's a little weird, but once you get used to everything, you can play this all the time with regular Switch games. Now I want to get into how this controller works when you're putting it on the Switch in portable mode. How does this work with the portability of the Nintendo Switch? Now, you may have noticed earlier in this video, when I was trying to take out this controller to make it into a Joy-Con, I had to put a lot of pressure. And in all honesty, there is a lot of pressure that you have to put into a controller like this to take it apart. I don't know if take it apart is the right word, but as you can see, I'm literally putting a lot of force into getting that out. And one of the things that I think is, I don't know if this is concerning, the little grip that they give you, because of me taking it in and out and having to do a lot of pressure to take it out, it's actually scratched up the grip a little bit and the actual controller here. So I think they could have done a little bit better of making it easier to take the controller out of the grip they give you. especially when I'm putting into my Switch. I have to put a lot of pressure into taking it out, and I don't like that. This is what they look like without the grip, in case anybody was curious. So satisfying. As you can see, I have turned my Nintendo Switch into a GameCube controller, and as you can see, this thing is massive. Absolutely massive. I mean, wow. I'm holding something that's bigger than a Steam Deck now. Obviously, because of how big this is, it could be very uncomfortable for some people if you're doing it in portable mode like this, but in all honesty, I have found that this has made portable Switch, or the portability of the Switch, way more comfortable for me. And for games like Smash Bros, obviously, you're kind of far away from the C-Stick, so if you're over here using the jump buttons, it's going to be hard to play Smash Bros when you're in the portable mode of the Switch, when you're using these controllers. For me, it's not difficult, because I actually use the joystick to jump. That's how I've always played Smash Bros. I know a lot of people use the Y button to jump, but if you're like me that doesn't use the Y button, this is going to be no issue for you. But if you're playing Smash Bros on the go, it's going to be very difficult, because you're going to be away from that C-Stick, because you're going to be trying to hit the jump button. It's very, not a lot of space right there. Now, something I do have a concern with this controller is the material on it, and this is probably where we are going down to why the thing is actually $70. I'm concerned that this thing is going to be easily scratched and ruined on the paint, because I guess you would call this plastic. The plastic, it's kind of like a very, very cheap plastic, if I'm being honest. It's not too bad, but it's a noticeable thing that has me concerned how this controller is going to, I guess, wear and tear is how I would use this. Because I like to keep myself, I like to keep these controllers clean, safe, not scratched up. But if you have like a kid that just destroys things, this thing is going to get destroyed in a day, probably less than a day. Because the material of this I don't think is that great. But for someone like me that doesn't damage things easily, it's not going to get damaged, I don't think, for me. But from a portability standpoint, I love playing my Switch like this. A lot of people would not like how big it makes your Switch, but with someone like me who has pretty big hands, I would like to say, it makes playing games so much more fun in portable mode, and it just feels very comfortable. Very, very comfortable. The problem is, for me, I'm not going to be able to take these controllers with me all the time to places, because they're so big. I have no way of packing my Switch and these controllers in the same thing. Luckily, like something like the Satisfy grip, I have a case that lets me have the Switch and the grip in the same case. And I don't know if this company sells something like that, but it would be very beneficial if you came out with something that has it where you could carry these controllers with you on the go with the Switch still being in there. That'd be pretty cool. But overall, very fun to play this portably, and I have no complaints from that point of view. Just the material of the controller, how hard it is to take it out, and I guess for some people, how big it makes your Switch and how your hand is far away from the C-Stick. I think, in all honesty, from a point of view of everything that we've talked about in this video, I think the question is, does this controller do a great job of being a GameCube controller? In my opinion, yes. It does an amazing job being a GameCube controller. The only real noticeable difference between this and a GameCube controller are the joysticks. But the buttons, the D-pad, the amazing buttons on the back, everything about this, I feel like is very great with some added benefits in there. With some cons of where the GameCube controller remains superior. And honestly, the GameCube controller is always going to be the superior option. But if you're trying to mimic that in the form of taking your Switch on the go, or if you don't even go out and about but just play your Switch portable all the time, and you want GameCube controller Joy-Cons, this is perfect for you. Because Nintendo is never going to come out with GameCube style Joy-Cons. I mean, I guess it's possible, but considering they didn't do it for the N64, I don't think it's going to happen. But for me, it was well worth the $70, and if I was to give this a scale to 1 to 10, it'd probably be like an 8 out of 10 for me. My gripes are obviously the material of the controller, the way it is that you have to charge these controllers if you're not using the portability of the Switch, and how hard it is to take it off your Switch or this grip that they give you for free, which the grip is pretty cool. They even put their own logo on the grip. I thought that was pretty cool. I love the colors that they gave you. Well, there's only one color. It's like your traditional purple GameCube controller. I think it's worth it. It all depends the type of gamer you are, though, and what you're looking for. This isn't a controller that I don't think everyone's going to want. It's really only for the nostalgic people that love the GameCube controller, and want to use a GameCube controller to play more games than just Smash Bros. This is for you guys. This is the controller to buy. So I think an 8 out of 10, pretty good with all the complaints I had and all of that, because there's a lot of pros with this controller. I'm very satisfied and I'm very glad I bought it. I'm going to enjoy playing other Switch games with this controller because I think it's fun. I like it a lot and I think you should buy it. Well guys, I have been talking for way too much. I want to know what you guys are thinking. Do you own one of these controllers? And what do you think of it in the comments down below? Please let me know. And if you don't own one, are you interested in getting one, or do you prefer your regular GameCube controller, not really interested in having GameCube style Joy-Cons? I want to know all that in the comments down below. Make sure to backslash that subscribe button, like the video, check out our Twitch. We've been streaming a lot on Twitch. I would love to see you guys there. Check out my Instagram, check out my Twitter, check out the Discord server, check out our newly made TikTok account, check out everything else that's in the description below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.